Just ahead on CTV News.
Governor Wes Moore delivers his State of the State address and outlines the difficult decisions coming for Maryland. Mariah Jalad, I'll have that coming up on CTV News.
The crowd here at this protest is growing by the minute. I'm Katara Jones in Washington, D.C. I'll tell you what they're fighting for coming up on CTV News.
Plus, we sit down with a new county executive candidate. Those stories and more on CTV News, starting now.
Good evening. This is CTV News for February 5th. I'm Michaela Newton. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, our top story tonight, Governor Wes Moore convened the State Assembly today to deliver his roadmap for improving life in Maryland and bringing it back from the brink of financial ruin. Mariah Jalad is in Annapolis with more.
The easy decisions are done. They're off the table. We only have difficult decisions ahead.
Maryland is being tested, but it's time to confront those issues head on. That's what Governor Wes Moore said today in the State of the State address, where he laid out the multiple crises Maryland is facing.
We are being tested by a historic fiscal challenge, the likes that we have not seen since the Great Recession. And if that wasn't enough, we are now being tested by a new administration in Washington that sows uncertainty and confusion and chaos. We have seen the beginnings of a trade war, the shutterings of federal agencies, and thousands of workers laid off.
Governor Moore made it clear to House and Senate members today that the storms he's been predicting have made landfall, but it's up to them to steer the state back to prosperity.
And in this moment, we must marshal the courage to move in partnership to build a state where our economy is growing, to build a state where our people are protected, to build a state where our children are no longer being born into poverty, and build a state where Maryland becomes the standard of what abundant opportunity actually looks like.
One of the governor's routes to that future is investing in the state's economic drivers, including the Port of Baltimore, whose new bridge design was unveiled just yesterday.
Maryland is a bridge between America and the rest of the world. And that is why this year, we have proposed new funding for a transformative project at Trade Point Atlantic. This work is going to increase the Port of Baltimore's container capacity by 70%, create more than 8,000 jobs, and generate $1 billion of private investment.
The main factor in Moore's plan to close the nearly $3 billion budget gap is raising taxes for high earners, which Republican members of the delegation are less than thrilled about. But the governor said those increases are necessary to fund essential services.
As someone who will be affected by this change, I'm okay with paying a little bit more if it means that we do not have to lay off firefighters or police officers.
The governor announced the launch of a national campaign to attract more teachers to Maryland. He also promised that the blueprint for Maryland's future would be implemented effectively, but he did say it needed to be revisited and funding adjusted. That's been a major point of contention in getting his budget plan passed.
Cuts to the community schools, I think, is a non-starter. Community schools hold our most vulnerable children, our lowest income kids, and so we should be uplifting them and supporting them, particularly given the current federal administration. I do not support cuts to community schools.
It's all a heavy undertaking as the state continues to worry about the future for its federal workers and as funding is on the chopping block. But that's why the governor says it's so important for the legislature to come together.
To meet the moment and to prove that we can stare down our greatest challenges knowing that we won't flinch, the challenge will.
These are fundamentally the same pillars that the governor laid out in his budget proposal earlier this year, but just as it was then, it's up to both chambers of the Assembly to push his agenda forward. From Annapolis, Mariah Jalad, CTV News.
All right, Mariah, thanks so much for that report. Meanwhile, for more than 6 decades, the United States Agency for International Development, or USAID, has been providing humanitarian support to foreign countries in crisis. Today, the agency is in its own state of crisis. The Washington, D.C. headquarters has been closed to its employees, and hundreds of contractors have been laid off or furloughed. Now, despite the uncertainty ahead, its workers are fighting back, and hundreds showed up for a rally to protest the agency's shutdown. CTV's Katera Jones was at that rally and is in the studio with more. Katera?
That's right, Michaela. The protesters we spoke to today at the USAID rally in Washington, D.C. are upset, frustrated, and deeply concerned about the future of the agency and the people who rely on those critical services. The United States Agency for International Development is America's foreign aid agency that supports countries around the world in conflict. Now, as we reported, President Donald Trump shut down the agency and closed its D.C. headquarters to its employees earlier this week. The president made this move after talks with billionaire Elon Musk, who is spearheading the Department of Government Efficiency, commonly referred to as DOGE. USAID workers were told not to come into the agency D.C. headquarters on Monday, and many were locked out of the agency's computer system. Now, we had an opportunity to speak to some of those workers today, like Charlotte Colvin from Chevrolet. She was a USAID contractor who had her work email cut off 9 days ago. Then the next day, she was laid off. Her work focused on supporting the agency tuberculosis programs. Then there is Chris Conklin from Alexandria. He was furloughed and told by his contractor last week to turn in his government-issued devices. Now, these stories are just some of the examples of the local impact of Trump's recent decision.
This is an overreach of the executive branch. We need for people to realize that there are people who are dying. Personally, I know of 2 clinical trials I was overseeing for children with tuberculosis that have now been shut down. And we're going to see, we've got a big Ebola outbreak happening in Uganda at the same time that one of our biggest partners there, Laboratory Systems, just lost 600 of their staff. And we need for Congress, honestly, to stand up.
I decided to come out today because I believe in what, the best that America has to offer. We're the greatest, strongest country in the world. We can't turn our back on the world. We can't turn our back on the world's most vulnerable and those that, are in times of need.
Marco Rubio, who is currently serving as the Secretary of State, is now the acting administrator of USAID. Reports also show there are about 10,000 USAID workers globally. Back to you, Michaela, at the desk.
All right, Katera, thanks so much for that report. Now to an update on that deadly plane and helicopter crash last week in the Potomac. Investigators say search and recovery efforts have ended with all 67 bodies recovered. Now, all but one have been identified, and officials call it a significant step in bringing closure to the families. With all bodies recovered, crews have resumed the task of removing debris of the passenger jet and Army helicopter from the water. And a second federal judge has paused President Trump's bid to end the constitutional guarantee of birthright citizenship. Groups seeking to protect it made their case before a federal judge in Greenbelt this morning. And the president wants to end that right to someone born in the U.S. to someone who is in the country illegally. Attorneys general from 22 states, including Maryland, have sued to block Trump's executive order. Now, the case in Greenbelt was filed on behalf of 5 pregnant mothers, some of whom are seeking asylum. All right, well, groundhog Punxsutawney Phil predicted 6 more weeks of winter, and his prophecy could be coming sooner than expected. The DMV area is expecting snow, sleet, and freezing rain tonight and early tomorrow morning. Now, today's lower temperatures are a break in the warming trend we have been seeing over the past week, which could lead to some hazardous road conditions on your way to work tomorrow. And you're watching CTV News. I'm Michaela Newton. Still to come, the tech industry is suing to block a new law aimed at protecting children and teens. Find out how and why after the break.
Thousands of North Atlantic right whales used to swim along the east coast of the United States and Canada. Collisions with ships and entanglement in fishing gear are killing these magnificent animals every year. They could go extinct in your lifetime. But there's hope. If we act now, before it's too late, join Oceana to save North Atlantic right whales from extinction.
Welcome back. President Trump also has big plans for the Gaza Strip. The surprise announcement came during a press conference yesterday with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House. Trump has proposed that United States take ownership of the Gaza Strip, displace 2 million Palestinians, and redevelop the area into what he called the river area of the Middle East. The announcement sparked strong reactions from Egypt and Jordan, where Trump wants to send the Palestinians as well as other American allies. Now, Middle East expert Lev White says it would be destabilizing.
So if the plan that President Trump actually stated, if it actually went forward the way he stated, you'd have the forced displacement of Palestinians, as he's put it, having been forced to go to Egypt and Jordan, which would unquestionably, I think, destabilize the populations there, partly just from the influx of, so many new people, but also, if you're thinking again about people who've been forced out of the place where they're living, and there's unquestionably would be political and probably militia activity on the parts of the Hamas operatives and everybody who would have been in Gaza and now being found in new places. So if this were to go forward the way it was actually sort of framed exactly by the president, I can only imagine destabilization in the neighboring countries.
Now, while some Republicans have broken ranks with the president over his Gaza plan, House Speaker Mike Johnson called it a bold move and advised holding judgment on the plan. And Prince George's police are investigating a deadly shooting in Accokeek Tuesday night. Officers arrived at the 15700 block of Livingston Road and found a woman suffering from gunshot wounds inside a home. She was later pronounced dead on the scene, but police are working to determine a cause and motive at this time. But anyone with any information on this case is asked to call 1-866-411-TIPS. And criminal justice advocates are backing Senate Bill 422, which would raise the age for juveniles to be tried as adults from 14 to 16 years old. It would also remove several crimes from the list for which 16-year-olds can be charged as adults. But the Baltimore County State's attorney argues the bill could delay justice and put public safety at risk, allowing serious offenders like 15-year-olds charged with crimes such as rape or armed carjacking to be tried in juvenile court. And last week, the Prince George's County Council discussed their recommendations report for increased school pedestrian safety. Prince George's County led the state in pedestrian deaths in 2023. CTV News caught up with District 2 Council member Winika Fisher about the next steps forward.
We heard the feedback, we heard the residents, we felt personally the deaths of our students, and so now that you have an actual work group, an actual document of recommendations, you actually have actionable things to ask for. And a lot of the things around pedestrian safety is that our county was built on very old infrastructure, and no one expected Prince George's County to be the 1 million person county that it is today, and especially where our schools are, we need to make sure our kids are safe. So I'm excited that we actually have a document to work from that was very transparent. All of our meetings were live streamed. We had student members, which was amazing. We had high school PGCTV students involved in this work. And so now we have something to go to the community that we want. And it's not just something that one person wants. Many people were invested in this.
Well, meanwhile, a day after Maryland Senate President Bill Ferguson and other lawmakers introduced a package of bills aimed at lower Marylanders' electricity costs, Ferguson concedes the measures would provide very little short-term relief. But a bill from Delegate Elizabeth Embry could see more immediate relief. She's introduced a bill that would scale back the STRIDE program, which expedites infrastructure maintenance and repair work by natural gas companies. But a similar bill failed to pass last year. And so to come on CTV News, CTV is bringing you one-on-one interviews with candidates for the county executive. After the break, we sit down with George McDermott. Back in a moment.
All right, ready, guys? You guys gotta be loud, though, okay? Hey, let's go! Let's go! Okay, repeat after me.
Yes, sir.
I am somebody.
Somebody.
I may be young.
I may be young.
But I am.
But I am.
Somebody.
Somebody.
I may be small.
I may be small.
But I am.
But I am. Somebody.
My clothes are different.
My clothes are different.
My face is different.
My face is different.
My hair is different.
My hair is different.
But I am.
But I am.
Somebody.
Somebody.
I must be respected.
I must be respected.
Protected.
Protected.
Never rejected.
Never rejected.
But I am.
I am.
Somebody.
Somebody.
I am. Somebody. I am. Somebody. I am. Somebody.
Somebody.
City address the emergency.
I'm not breathing, right? She's not breathing, and you know Dad here.
They didn't think I was going to make it.
The pacemaker that gave me a second chance at life was developed through research funded by the American Heart Association. Learn more about the American Heart Association's life-saving work at helpheart.org.
The special primary election for the county executive seat is 1 month away. In the next coming week, CTV will bring you exclusive interviews with each of those candidates. And joining us now in the studio is candidate George McDermott. Mr. Dermott, thanks so much for joining us today.
Pleasure.
Awesome. So you've been a business and victims' right advocate, but you have little to no political experience. So how do you think that your current experience and what you do now is going to help the residents of Prince George's County?
Well, I have extensive experience in law and in government, and our government is failing 90% of our citizens. Our courts are failing 90% of our citizens. The majority of these candidates are coming on, are trying to get office, are lawyers, and they're not doing their job. In the first place, I don't believe that most of them even have a right under the FISA agreement of 1949. They surrendered their citizenship when they took their last oath of office. And under U.S. Code 28 U.S.C. 1603 and 28 U.S.C. 2001A, the United States is a federal corporation. It's a corporation. It's no longer a government. Now, I've given Gina some information on that, and you can back it up. It's out of the Constitution of the United States, printed 2024. Now, if not one court in the United States, the Supreme Court of the United States, the Maryland's highest court, will answer a certification of a question of law as to whether that law has been repealed. I've been fighting for this for 20 years. As a businessman, I wanted to build a $2.2 billion development at Branch Avenue and Suitland Parkway in 1992. And Governor Glendenning steps in with his mafia-controlled agents, and they steal my businesses that I had a 56,000-foot racket club, a 50,000-foot roller rink, a 13,000-foot hardware store. And since then, I have been fighting the fight for the people of Prince George's County to get honest government and to expose the waste, fraud, and corruption that's taking place in our state and federal courts. They don't care about our average citizens. 20,000 people have lost their homes to illegal foreclosures with forged documents. The state's attorneys will refuse to allow anybody to even file a complaint to get their cases heard in court. Under the Northwest Ordinance, you can't take sovereign soil of citizens of the United States of America without due process of the law and without a jury trial.
Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit. So the county is in the midst of a $170 million budget deficit. So what are some of the things that you see as potential targets for some of those cost-cutting measures that you would put in place without compromising some essential services?
Well, you shouldn't compromise. You should basically get 70% of the people in government and the lower up to the last 4% are hardworking public servants who do their job, that the oath of office they took, they do a good job. The top people in our government want that post so they can enrich themselves at the expense of all other citizens. If we just even tapped a little bit of white-collar fraud and mortgage fraud, the money that we get back, where our citizens are losing billions and tens of billions of dollars in illegal foreclosures. And yet the state's attorney won't allow anybody to file a complaint. The Justice Department won't allow anybody to file a complaint. The FBI won't allow anybody to file a complaint. And when you go to court and win, which I have done many times, jury trial, I've argued my own jury trials, then they turn around and a jury trial is never supposed to be overturned, period. But they've overturned all 3 of my jury trials, and they've held a gun to my head for the last 35 years.
So let's talk about affordable housing. So right now, the average price in the county is about $400,000. Would you consider affordable housing an important, topic in the county? And what would your strategic plan be?
Affordable housing is, you can't build a society without affordable housing. You have to, because you have the people who keep the industry running. They have to be allowed to live close enough that they do not waste all their resources going to and from work. We have people who are living almost 100 miles away coming into work because they can't find affordable housing. We have lots of areas within Prince George's County, Maryland, inside the Beltway, which was Paris Glendenning and his mafia-controlled friends declared a red zone in 1984, and said that all the development is going to go outside the Beltway to their rich friends and landowners. Redevelop the inside. Redevelopment is where it's at. For 20 years, I redeveloped malls and shopping centers and worked on stores. And you have to build a base of workers that can have access to the facilities.
So let's talk about economic development. It's a huge factor. What are some ways you would try to attract new business and bring that into the county?
You got to stop the fraud and corruption in our government. It's out of control. I've got 20,000 docket entries and 120 court cases. I have hundreds of people I've interviewed. Not one of them ever get a jury trial. They have their homes taken from them, their businesses taken from them. The state's attorney won't allow any of them to file a complaint. The U.S. attorney won't. The governor's saying, "Oh, well, we need to give raise money." Well, stop giving these banks and international institutions, which are all foreign entities, stop giving them these breaks and clamp down and make them pay their average, their due on taxes, and stop giving them breaks and covering up for their theft of tax resources they use.
All right, Mr. McDermott, thanks so much
for
joining us today in the studio.
You have a blessed day, my dear.
All right, make sure you turn in tomorrow as we introduce another candidate, Tanya Sweat, only on CTV News. And Simon Buggs is here with our Wednesday sports page.
Hey sports fans, and coming up on your Wednesday sports page, some big news out of the University of Maryland's athletic program. Stay tuned to find out what athletic director Damon Evans had to say. Don't go anywhere.
Nothing you could say could tear me away from my dog. My dog is Shallow, y'all. Hi, I'm Smokey Robinson. When you adopt a shelter pet, you not only bring joy and love into your home, you also give another animal the chance to experience that special bond. Join me in supporting American Humane Society and their incredible work to help our most vulnerable friends. Together, we can make a real difference.
What's going on, everybody? Go ahead and grab a seat because it's finally time for your Wednesday sports page. We begin with the world of high school hoops as the Flowers boys basketball team is racking up wins so far this season as the Jaguars currently have a record of 14-2. The team is definitely one to look out for come playoff time as they look poised to hang another championship banner. And head coach Brian Brooks told me what has gone into the team's success so far this season.
Our size, speed, and quickness. We do something that most teams don't do. We throw the ball inside majority of the time. Most teams play from the outside. We play inside out.
The Jaguars look to add another win to their total when they take the court against Suitland on Friday. Now to the world of college sports, student athletes are very hard workers. Having to balance school and making sure they give their best performance in their respective sports can be tough to do. But soon, Terps athletes will be rewarded as they'll be compensated by UMD directly. Maryland Athletics will begin sharing over $20 million with their athletes beginning this fall. The majority of the amount will be divided among the school's most revenue-producing sports in football and men and women's basketball. Maryland Athletic Director Damon Evans also shared that he expects the school's athletic department to take on $25 million in new expenses. This is due to a settlement reached in the House versus NCAA lawsuit that will force schools to pay back damages of almost $3 billion to former athletes if finalized. And UMD's share of that is $1.5 million annually over the next 10 years. And sticking with Terp sports news, one student athlete that will be looking to make a big impact this season is utility player Chris Hakopian of the school's baseball team. The Maryland native had a monster freshman season, making second team All Big Ten and the Big Ten All Freshman team as well. He was also second on the team in hits with 72. I caught up with the sophomore recently and he told me what his focus is in 2025 to build off of his stellar freshman season.
I think this year just really, learning from what I did last year and just, making, minor adjustments and learning the game every day. But I think one thing I'm really focused on right now is just trying to get better every day. I don't think I can really look too far into the future, because I think once you do that, you kind of mess up with your mental side. So just kind of playing it day by day.
Hakopian and the rest of the team will open up the season versus UAB on Valentine's Day. Switching gears to the NBA, the Washington Wizards shook up their roster, trading forward Kyle Kuzma to the Milwaukee Bucks in exchange for three-time All-Star and NBA champion Chris Middleton, A.J. Johnson, and a 2028 pick swap. During Kuz's time in the nation's capital, the 29-year-old averaged 20 points, 7 boards, and 4 dimes. He will team up with one of the league's best players in Giannis Antetokounmpo, as well as All-Star guard Damian Lillard. And wrapping up sports, the Washington Capitals came out on top against the Florida Panthers last night, 6-3. The team is now 35-11-7, and they will take the ice next against the Philadelphia Flyers tomorrow at 7 o'clock. And that wraps up your Wednesday sports page. Simon Buggs, CTV Sports.
All right, Simon, thanks so much. Well, let's get a look at our 3-day weather forecast tonight. A heavy chance of rain and sleet is likely. Tomorrow we'll have a high of 45, but expect a wintry mix of sleet and possibly some freezing rain. Friday, it's going to be nice and sunny with a high of 51. Saturday, it's going to be 39 degrees. We have a 60% chance of snow in the day and an 80% chance of rain that night. And before we go, let's get a look at that's all the time we have. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a good night.